Today on Inside Utah Politics, to split or not to split one of Utah's biggest school districts. That issue going to the voters, and we dive into the pros and the cons. Stay tuned for that. Lawmakers discovered difficulties verifying signatures, how some of the candidates are reacting to the results of a new audit. The presidential candidates are making their final appeals. Which voting bloc has emerged as a late target for both campaigns?
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Brien McElhatten. Let's go inside Utah politics now. And we begin our program today looking at what could be one of the most controversial local issues on the Utah County ballot, Propositions 11 and 14. Now, those propositions stand for the proposal to split the Alpine School District from east to west. 11 appears on the ballot in the eastern cities of Lehigh, American Fork, Highland, Alpine, Cedar Hills, and parts of Draper. 14 applies to Cedar Fort, Eagle Mountain, Fairfield, Saratoga Springs, and certain unincorporated parts of the county. So to dig into this issue, I'm joined by a panel of 4 educators, 2 for the split and 2 against. Representing the pro-split stance, we have Stacy Bateman, a current member of the Alpine School Board, and Kelly Smith from the Cedar Hill City Council, a former Alpine educator. And representing those against the split, we have Kate Ross, the principal of Oak Canyon Junior High, and Joe Jensen, Director of Administrative Development at the Alpine School District. Everybody, welcome to Inside Utah Politics. We don't always have a crowd, but we're glad to have you here today for this discussion. Thanks for being here. I'd like to address the pro-split side first, Kelly and Stacy. It took years of discussion and study to get the movement to split the districts to this point. What convinced you that something needed to change in the status quo of Utah's biggest school district?
I think I'll take this one since I am on the city council, and it's city councils that put this on the ballot. We started to notice a few things were happening with when our bond failed. So our bond failed in 2022, and we started to have some pains with that financially. And so we, as cities, we wanted to look at what the options were. The West had decided that they really wanted to look at an interlocal, and when they decided to put one forward, the central area where I live also wanted to give a choice to residents. And so instead of just being what would be the default if the West decided to do that, we decided to give residents a choice if they would like to be a central school district. And we thought that was a viable option to put out to residents.
Okay, why don't we check in with Kate and Joe now? We just heard some of the arguments in favor of the split. Why do these things maybe not convince you that this is needed?
Go ahead.
Oh. Mm-hmm. Well, Brien, thank you. You know, one of the things that I think is a key here is that we're actually not anti-split. There are some benefits to a large district. There's some benefits to a small district. And we actually would probably agree with 90% of what they're saying would be good about a smaller district. But I think our concern is how it's being done, because how it's being done matters. A simple metaphor, we could bake a cake, right? And we could use the same batter, the same pan, the same oven. And if I bake it at 350 degrees for 32 minutes and someone else bakes it at 500 degrees for 12 minutes, that's going to be a very different cake. And I think what we're saying is we have one chance to split a district. Let's do it right, and let's be upfront and transparent about what that looks like. And the biggest thing for us is no matter what, and this is corroborated by their study, it's corroborated by the MGT study done by Alpine District. No matter how you split a district, there's no getting around it. No matter how you split a district, it will be more expensive. And so I would vote for that if it was advertised as it's going to be more expensive. Here's roughly how much. Here's what you get out of it. And I would vote for that in a heartbeat. But I think it's hard to convince all Utah County voters of that. And so that's why we have concerns with this split.
Yeah, Kate, I saw you shaking your head there. You agree with Joe on those points?
I absolutely do. After the 2022 bond did not pass, it was pretty commonplace to hear constituents say, okay, we get it now. Can we have a redo? You know, they didn't fully understand the gravity of what they did or did not vote for. And I think our biggest issue here is we want to make sure that our constituency knows what they're voting for, and that they know, you know, I mean, this actually is the dismantling of one of the highest performing school districts in the state of Utah. And the way that state statute is written, Alpine School District will cease to exist if any part is split off. And I think sometimes our constituents, even some of our fellow educators, don't realize this is the end of Alpine if there is a split.
Kelly and Stacy, I want to know your reaction to that, talking about dismantling that school district and what Kate's concerns were. How do you respond to that point of view?
I think we all have concerns making sure that we're taking care of the people that we're responsible for. But really, we see this as an opportunity to be able to meet each area's individual needs more adequately. When the bond failed, it really started to surface some more of our capital needs and also program needs. So this allows us to make sure that every student in every area has access to programs. And we really believe that our residents, as they've come out and said that they will support smaller bonds or bonds that are targeted for a closer geographic area. We want to be mindful of our taxpayers, our residents who are on fixed income, and so this will allow us to better redirect those resources.
So another question for you, Stacy, the specter of wealth hangs over this conversation, right? Because the eastern cities have a higher median household income than the western cities, about a $10,000 difference. How does that factor into this in your thinking on the matter?
So one of the great things that the cities did as they were looking at the different configurations that they could bring forward was to make sure that whatever was chosen would be best for everybody in the next 5 to 10 years, as well as 50 plus years down the road. So in each of the 3 areas, there's a solid tax base, so Eagle Mountain, Lehigh, and Orem. And then there's also corresponding capital projects. So being able to distribute those evenly, Lehigh has the highest property tax base, Orem comes in second. So we'll be able to take care of kids well because they are well distributed in that way.
Joe, I want to get your thoughts on that too, this issue of maybe a wealth disparity between the east side and the west side. Do you echo Stacy's thoughts there, or where are you on that?
No, in fact, one of my biggest concerns about why I will not vote for this is that it was going to be allowed that the district could put on the ballot what their study was showing, which it looked as though it was going to be, they were going to put a 2-way split on the ballot. But then the legislature in special session undermined that and disenfranchised 81,000 voters in Pleasant Grove, Orem, Vineyard, and Linden. And so now a third of the district doesn't even get to vote on this. And that's, by the way, a group that 2 years ago voted 3-1, nearly 75% to 25% saying we do not want to split. And so I think that's another reason why how this is being done is a negative. And again, we get one chance at a district split. Let's do it right so that the thrivability of students and teachers can be addressed.
Stacy and Kelly, here's a question for you. How does where you live impact your view of this issue? What are the effects you think this will have on your community?
So I think depending where you live right now really affects what your opportunities are for your students in your area, whether they're in your home or your neighborhood students. So everybody has a slightly different view of this. If you live out in Saratoga and Eagle Mountain, we are not building schools fast enough to house those students. And then on the east side, we see a lot of declining enrollment. And so one of the best things about this is that each district will be able to balance those opportunities better, as well as the impact in their community.
Okay, let's talk to the rest of you about this issue here and how this will impact the communities that you live in going forward if this thing passes, or if it doesn't pass. Joe and Kate, what say you?
Well, I'd like to, address the fact that a large portion of our Alpine School District employees are opposed or they have some major concerns about what this split will mean. And, you know, if you have a mass exodus of educators, that definitely impacts communities. And no one knows for sure if there will be a mass exodus. I think therein is the real problem. A lot of decisions about what these future school districts might be or what they may do, it's going to be determined by a future school board, a school board that has not been elected. And I mean, obviously, you could have a really great scenario, you could have a horrible scenario, and that unknown is really concerning. Plus, you know, by and large, people love their neighborhood schools. And if you see a change to your neighborhood school, that impacts you. You might not be involved in politics and know what's happening at a district level, but you know what's happening at your neighborhood school, and you love your neighborhood school, and you don't want that to change, but it will. And so that's, you know, I mean, I think we need to address some of the concerns of these educators, myself included, where we don't really know what we're getting.
That sounds like a good final elevator pitch for your side of things. Stacey and Kelly, final pitch to the voters on your pro side of this.
I would say I think we spend a lot of time looking at the negatives that could happen instead of focusing on the positives that we could have. And I think we can do either situation, but if we stay together, we're looking at needing to do close to an $800 million bond to take care of, even just to scratch the surface of the needs that we have. And so voters need to understand that if they vote no and they want to stay together, that their very next vote needs to be yes to a very large bond. And that if that next bond doesn't pass, or if just the West splits off and the East is left, we have some really difficult decisions. And we have the opportunity to have more representation to make them if we have smaller school districts, and the opportunity to vote for smaller bonds that are closer to home.
Okay, Stacey, Kelly, Kate, and Joe, I want to thank you all for having a nice discussion on this, something very important that the voters will have to think about. Really, I can't think of anything other than a city or town council that touches the voters as much as a local school district, and that's why these things are so important. Thank you all for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing what happens next. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Brien.
Of course. Still ahead here on Inside Utah Politics, an audit finds issues in the signature gathering process, how some of Utah's top political leaders want to see it change. And there's more, too. Governor Cox urges action on the fentanyl crisis, where he hopes Utah will make progress, and why some are calling his speech political theater. Stay with us. The Salt Lake County Recorder is under some scrutiny now for what some critics are calling an improper use of taxpayer money. Democrat Rochelle Hobbs is running for re-election, and this past week, the Salt Lake County Council discussed some mailers coming from her office. The mailer shows her name and face and explains some of the functions of the office. Well, some people online have called this taxpayer-funded campaigning, so we reached out to her office. And she tells us the flyer was cleared with the district attorney's office and explains a taxpayer-funded program, something her office is legally required to do.
Had there not been an insert, this is what would have notified homeowners about Property Watch. At the bottom of the fourth paragraph in these two sentences,
Now, her opponent, former Salt Lake County Councilman Republican Richard Snellgrove, however, questions the timing of the flyer, saying it went out the same time as ballots, despite Property Watch being 5 years old. He tells us this: as your Salt Lake County Recorder, I will bring back ethics, integrity, accountability, and transparency to the County Recorder's office. An audit found issues with verifying signatures that got several top candidates on the ballot. That audit mentions the campaigns for Governor Spencer Cox, Congressman John Curtis, and Attorney General hopeful Derek Brown, all Republican nominees and frontrunners in their races. Auditors made it clear, though, the candidates fully complied with the law, and the findings of this audit did not affect their qualifications to run. Now, the report chalked many of these errors up to human error and differences in training for the staff working on the signature verification.
Governor Cox, he had submitted about 492 additional signatures. Congressman Curtis had submitted about 2,600 additional signatures, and Derek Brown had submitted about 1,800 additional signatures. Along with that, they each had more time to gather and submit additional signatures.
Now, the auditors made some recommendations like a formalized chain of custody from the lieutenant governor's office and allowing the public to watch the signature verification. This, of course, has been a hot button issue this election, with gubernatorial write-in candidate Phil Lyman implying there was wrongdoing in that signature gathering process. He responded to this report in part by saying shocked, just shocked, I tell you. The Salt Lake County clerk is worried that the length of this year's ballots could actually stop people from completing them. Now, mail-in ballots began to arrive at homes across the state this past week. But Salt Lake County, the ballot is a big one. It's the only county in Utah where candidates, bonds, and issues take up the front and back of 2 pages. The Salt Lake County clerk is worried that voters won't return both of those pages, and you're encouraged to send both pages in, even if you don't fill everything out.
It is so critical that we have representatives that represent us. The only way that's going to happen is if you vote your ballot. You can do it either using your by-mail ballot, or of course you can go vote in person.
And as a reminder, Election Day coming up November 5th. The last day to request a mail-in ballot is October 29th. You can also register to vote in person at a polling place on Election Day. Governor Spencer Cox announced a new task force aimed at addressing one of the most dangerous drugs out there. That would be fentanyl. Kate Gardner breaks down what fentanyl use looks like in Utah and what this new task force plans to do.
It's a huge problem here in Utah. The Department of Public Safety says that in just 2023, law enforcement seized more than 2 million fentanyl pills and 300 pounds of powder. Now, agencies across the state are coming together to figure out how to better improve prevention, treatment, enforcement, and rehabilitation practices.
My life was completely out of control and I had no hope left.
Growing up, Misty Lopez was surrounded by addiction.
Heroin was my first escape, but fentanyl quickly followed. It was easy to get, too easy in fact. Many times I picked it up right here along the Jordan River Trail.
After her uncle's death, it only got worse.
And I was ready to end my life. I had made the decision to shoot up one last time so that I could just end it all.
But before she could, police arrested her. And for the first time, something clicked.
I didn't want my children to get a phone call that their mom had died in a ditch somewhere.
She's now been sober for more than 3 years, is working on a PhD, and runs a recovery center.
To give others the tools they need to overcome addiction just like I did.
She's a success story, but with fentanyl, that's rarely the case.
The smallest towns in Utah are being impacted by fentanyl. The wealthiest neighborhoods in Utah are being impacted by fentanyl. It is happening everywhere, and everyone plays a role in helping us to prevent this from moving forward.
The Utah Bureau of Forensic Services performs tests on drugs police seize. In 2024, more than 30% of all drugs have had traces of fentanyl.
The number of overdose deaths in 2023 reached the highest number on record in Utah at 606 deaths. 290 of overdose deaths in 2023 were fentanyl related.
Governor Spencer Cox says fentanyl is more accessible now than ever. In 2019, a pill sold between $12 and $20 on the streets. Last year, it dropped to between $4 and $8. That's where the fentanyl task force comes in.
I believe that we can all agree that this state that we love and the communities in which we live will be much better off as we educate and eradicate the effects of fentanyl, and while we keep Utah safe.
Jess Anderson says the task force has 7 main objectives, including reducing the demand through prevention and treatment, data collection and resource allocation by working with federal, state, and local agencies, and disrupting trafficking networks. The state is also looking at adopting new laws similar to those already passed in other states. For instance, in Florida, if someone provides fentanyl to another person and it results in that person's death, then the supplier can be charged with murder. And in South Carolina, a first-time offense for possession can carry up to 5 years in prison. Reporting from Salt Lake City, Kate Garner, ABC4 News.
Hey, thanks a lot to Cade for that report. Cox's announcement this week came with mixed reactions. Utah Democrats condemned the framing of the crisis as an immigration and border security issue. Democratic gubernatorial candidate Brien said in part this: 21 days ahead of the general election, Governor Spencer Cox chose to politicize the fentanyl crisis rather than offer real solutions. after spending the weekend at a rally with Donald Trump in California, where he received a shout out from the former president on stage. Governor Cox is now taking a page right out of Trump's playbook. Instead of addressing the root causes of this tragic epidemic, he used his press conference to parrot anti-immigrant rhetoric and blame rather than deliver real-time solutions. Coming up here on IUP, the final days of the 2024 presidential race are upon us now. Kamala Harris and Donald Trump are focusing their efforts in hopes of moving the needle.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
The small business owners, homeowners, renters affected by the recent hurricanes may have to wait longer now to get some disaster relief because the Small Business Administration says its loan program is broke. Our Washington correspondent Jesse Tunor reports on what happens next.
A funding stream for many Americans hit by recent hurricanes has run out of money.
A critical lifeline to small businesses, homeowners, renters affected by disasters.
The Small Business Administration's disaster loan program offers up to $2 million for businesses and up to $500,000 for homeowners to repair or replace property. But the program is broke. After receiving nearly 50,000 applications from hurricane victims and approving $48 million in loans.
We need Congress to do its job.
Additional funding for the low-interest loans requires congressional approval, but lawmakers do not plan on returning to the U.S. Capitol until after the election. House Speaker Mike Johnson vowed to act then.
And so that's the commitment that he made. That's what we want to see.
In the meantime, SBA says storm victims should still submit applications for the loans so the agency can process them and then provide the funds as soon as Congress acts. The funding shortfall does not impact disaster relief from FEMA, which provides grants, not loans.
We are not going anywhere.
Administrator Deanne Criswell says FEMA crews are still on the ground to help connect people to the money.
Working directly with survivors for as long as it takes.
But Criswell says FEMA will also eventually need more funding from Congress. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tunor.
Just weeks out from Election Day, and Vice President Kamala Harris is zeroing in on black male voters. Recent polling suggests that once reliable Democratic voting bloc is now pivoting towards former President Donald Trump. And right now, both candidates are trying to shore up their support. Our D.C. correspondent Raquel Martin has the latest.
Vice President Kamala Harris is working to bring black men back into the fold across key battleground states.
I have to earn their vote.
During a radio interview Tuesday in Detroit, Michigan, the VP laid out her plans to uplift black men. She says that includes investments to help black-owned small businesses, help with down payments for home ownership, and she says she'll work to legalize marijuana.
Because I know exactly how those laws have been used to disproportionately impact certain populations and specifically black men.
Some polls suggest an increasing number of young black men are unhappy with Democrats and are backing former President Donald Trump. Former Detroit Mayor Kwame Kilpatrick says they like Trump's straight talk.
They like somebody that says it hard. What they want to hear is, I'm just going to get it done for you.
What is the Trump campaign offering as an alternative?
Donald Trump has said and done since he's been in office, he wants to put black people in business.
In Atlanta, Georgia, another battleground for black voters. Trump argued black Americans should not trust Democrats.
Kamala's open border policy is a complete and total betrayal of African American communities.
Congressional Black Caucus Chairman, Democrat Stephen Horsford, argues Trump is the one who should not be trusted.
The whole strategy is to target one group of people and to pit that group against another.
In Washington, Raquel Martin.
Stay with us, everybody. More Inside Utah Politics coming up right after this. That does it for today's Inside Utah Politics. Don't forget, though, if you have any local political stories you'd like to see, make sure to reach out to us. You can email InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow along with me on social media, on X @Brien Reports, and on Instagram. You can search for Brien McElhatten. And you can find ABC4 on social media, too, and download the ABC4 News app. We are always on. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody. We hope to see you right back here next week.